Hi everyone, my name is Cassandra Kelsey. I am a health psychologist in doctoral training. Welcome to this little mini webinar that I'm doing, little mini lecture, little session I'm doing all about emotional regulation systems. Very interesting subject. And this is going to be perfect for you if you're interested in being able to gently handle your emotions in a better way. A way that just works better for you. So our emotions can have a really profound effect on our thoughts, but also on our health and our general well-being. So we're going to take a look at why that could be the case. And we're going to be using the emotional regulation systems devised by Professor Paul Gilbert, OBE, I believe. He is a very eminent psychologist in the field of compassion-focused therapy. Pretty much devised all of that stuff. So the three emotional systems identified here by Professor Gilbert contribute to our survival and our well-being. And the aim that we've got with all of these is to achieve balance so that we can have a healthy, rich and a fulfilling life. We experience well-being and resilience when we move between the three systems freely according to our situation and our needs. So we'll get going now and have a look at how all of that works and try and understand how it can help us in our daily lives as we go along. Let's get going. First, we're going to talk about shame. Now, shame is that powerful emotion that we can have that is all around not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, feeling like we're in some way intrinsically broken. It can be a really difficult and a powerful emotion. And excessive self-criticism can be the consequence, the cognitive consequence of that. And that is a way of thinking that comes from this powerful feeling. Those of us who struggle with these feelings and thoughts can in turn struggle to feel safe and whole. And that in turn can affect our behavior, which may adapt in ways that are not really helpful to us. And although these behaviors may not be helpful, we can sometimes lean into the behaviors with the one purpose of somehow relieving or just getting rid of those difficult feelings or thoughts we've been experiencing and struggling with. So in psychology, especially clinical psychology, we can see that shame and self-criticism have been linked to a number of clinical disorders or mental health conditions. And whatever the diagnosis, this shame and self-criticism can be a common feature across many of those diagnoses. So it can play a part in depression, anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, body dysmorphic disorders, eating disorders, and non-suicidal self-harm, and certain personality disorders as well, including borderline personality, cluster B, and of course complex and early childhood trauma also have strong links to shame and self-criticism. So yeah, it cuts across all of these difficult diagnoses that we can sometimes have. So we've got the shame and the self-criticism and those links to lots of different mental health conditions. But why does this happen for us? Well, research suggests that a specific set of systems lie under the surface and that they regulate our sense of safety, well-being and reassurance. Psychologists think that these are probably linked to our early attachment experiences. And that's how we grew up from being little babies to being adults and what our experience was of being cared for and nurtured. Now, our experience of that attachment process to our main caregiver, whoever that was, can impact on our ability to respond to ourselves and to others in a soothing and a calming way. So if our experience in childhood was warm and loving and supportive and reassuring, then in adulthood we're more likely to have learned how to engage with the underlying systems that allow us to feel safe. So, in compassion-focused therapy, what we say is that the systems that regulate our sense of safety and our well-being respond poorly when we have a high sense of shame or are highly self-critical in our thoughts, feelings, and our behaviours. We can look at this system as containing three components. The first is the drive system. This system is all about the things we want or need to do and our motivation in doing them. When we're thinking about tasks, planning them and executing them, then we're using our drive system. It can also be about our desires, and it can include powerful emotions like lust, greed, and our desire to attain power or control. And when we engage with our drive systems, the reward center of our brain lights up and we experience thrilling feelings like pleasure or excitement when we attain that goal or that thing that we want. And the important role of the drive system is that it allows us to accomplish the things that we want and we need. So the next part of our little system diagram here is the threat defense system, and this is our survival system. It exists solely to keep us safe in a world with many unknown and potential threats. In psychology we call this an adaptive or an evolutionary system, the fight, flight and freeze system. Now this system is very, very important because it can potentially save our lives. However, for a lot of us, it can also be a system that is overactivated and that can create real problems for us and contribute to feelings of fear, anxiety, disgust, anger, sadness, hate, insecurity and paranoia. Where there's any doubt about whether something's a threat, up pops our threat system and tells us what to do. And that can be to attack, react with disgust or contempt, or of course run away. This system is also responsible for the voice of our inner critic, who tries to keep us safe, sometimes in a useful way, but sometimes that can also be in a harmful or unhelpful way. The last component is the soothing system, where we experience feelings of warmth and calm, safety and ease, and almost comfortable feelings. It's here that we experience the feelings of belonging, acceptance, and a sense of being valued as well, both by others and ourselves. Now, the soothing system allows us to rest, but also to set aside our judgments and to be grateful and compassionate. This system allows us to recover and rest, rejuvenate and reflect on things and gain valuable awareness and perspective. This system also has an important role in being a mediator or a regulator between the other two systems, helping them to avoid becoming overactivated or dominant in our lives. When we look at the emotional regulation system and its components, we can say that it's based in both evolutionary and developmental psychology. Each of these systems is associated with different bits of our brain and its chemistry. But these components that we're looking at, they aren't just about our brains or our neurology, the wiring. They also impact on our mental, emotional, physical and our social well-being, as well as being affected by the culture and the world that we live in. So here with our drive function, what have we got? Well, the bit of our brain that we're looking at is the nucleus accumbens. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter at play here. But the feelings and the thoughts associated with that could be around pleasure, because dopamine is a reward chemical. But it can also be desire. We're chasing that thing that we want, motivation, and a feeling of being highly focused and determined. In the case of our threat or protection system, we've got one of the oldest bits of our brain working hard here, and that is our amygdala. And when we encounter that threat in our environment, our amygdala just lights up. And then we are flooded with those stress chemicals, adrenaline and cortisol, flooding through our central nervous system, getting our bodies and ourselves ready for that fight, flight or freeze, to encounter that threat in our environment that we've come across or has found us. And some of the emotions that we might feel around that could be things like anxiety, fear, or even anger. Anger would be quite a common one as well. So the Soothe system here we've got is our last one that we're looking at again, and that can be involved in managing our distress, but it can also be involved in promoting bonding, the social bonding that we do. And the bit of our brain that we've got working here is our prefrontal cortex. And the brain chemical oxytocin, they call it the cuddle chemical, don't they? It's flowing through us, allowing us to feel calm and relaxed and safe and protected. Importantly, you might have noticed that in our diagram here, all three circles are the same size. And that's great. That's an ideal situation where everything is perfectly balanced. All of these drive systems are important. There aren't any bad guys here. We do need them all. None of them are either good or bad. They just serve a function. And when everything's more or less in balance, that works just great. But the distress and the difficulty comes along when something is off balance. It's off center. So something we can do for ourselves when we think about these three circles and these drives, we can reflect and consider how big is each one for us at any given time to help us gain awareness of what's going on for us. It's a useful exercise to be able to do. And when we've got that awareness, when we can see that, maybe even we draw it on a piece of paper. Once we've done that and we can see that, it can help us to learn a little more about ourselves. It can even help us to track triggers and to find a way to balance our drives more effectively. And there are lots of ways that we can do that. You might notice that on the Soothe circle here, we have opiates on here. So chemicals and drugs and pharmaceutical interventions are one way that we're able to impact upon our three drives here. So we can administer a medicine to help us manage our threat drive in the case of anxiety. So that's a good example. So that is worth noting as well. But those pharmaceutical interventions are just one way to address this imbalance that we might have going on. There are lots of other ways we could do that. Everything from talking therapies to exercise to mindfulness. The list is very long of ways that we can address and balance our drives to make our lives better, healthier, and more fulfilling. So the next thing that we're going to do is have a look at our emotional regulation systems here and use a real world example. So the first thing that we've got here is our drive system. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look at triggers, emotions and behaviors and link that to our drive system. The first thing you're going to notice here is that this circle has grown, and this represents kind of the intensity and the level of how powerful this drive is for you at any given time. So we imagine a situation that some of us may have been in. If you've not been in the situation, then try and relate this to your own experiences. And we're at work, perhaps our boss is giving us a task with a deadline to write a report, but we know very well that we've got a colleague a couple of desks away who's working on a similar task. And what are the emotions around this? Well, we might have competitive feelings here and a desire to succeed. And we remember we've got all that dopamine stuff all rushing around, our reward chemicals. We're looking for that. And we want this promotion. We want the promotion. And why do we want it? Well, we're looking to increase our resources and get that pay rise. And we can link this kind of to our threat response, the reduction of threat and the increase in a sense of safety. So we're linking this to our other drives. By attaining the promotion, we're reducing the chance that we're going to be threatened, and we are increasing the likelihood that we're going to be comfortable. So what is the behavior here? We can see what the emotions are, but what is the behavior? Well, we might decide that since we're so committed and we really, really want to try our hardest to succeed at this task, then we're gonna kind of hardcore it. We're gonna drink a lot of coffee. We're gonna work really late. We're gonna push it to the limit here. We're not gonna take breaks, and we're gonna try and get this task completed. So what next? What have we got next? Here we have our threat system. Again, we can see that this one is growing. It's got bigger. And what is the trigger here, the threat? Well, perhaps while we're working, one of our colleagues tries to make a helpful suggestion. And we interpret that as criticism. We see that as threatening. And what are the emotions here? Well, immediately, because of that sense of threat, we might feel very angry at this person. And that anger comes from fear that somebody's going to take away our success or maybe sabotage it and threaten our security in our life there. So it has those survival underpinnings here. You're kind of sabotaging me in this chance that I've got of succeeding with this task. So you've cognitively interpreted that in your mind as a criticism, even if that colleague was well-meaning, which they maybe were, who knows? And what behaviour have we got from this? Well, maybe you've been really short with this colleague. Perhaps you've had some harsh words with them. Maybe you even yelled at them. Or it could be that some of that behaviour is really bordering on unacceptable in the workplace. It can be quite serious consequences, couldn't it, when you think about it? So our threat drive circle here is not that much smaller than the drive one, we can see. So what happens here? We've had a terrible day. We've been working hard. Maybe our colleague even suggested that we take a break and we ignored that. And off we go home because our report has gone in late. We've made some mistakes because we've really just pushed it too hard. And we haven't succeeded at that task. So here's our trigger here. And our emotions that we're trying to soothe are that shame and the frustration from not accomplishing what we set out to do with this massive drive circle here that we've got bearing down on us. And we'll notice that our Soothe circle is quite small in comparison to the other two here, isn't it? Perhaps we're the kind of person who was never really taught, or it was never modelled to them how to be kind to themselves, how to soothe themselves. Perhaps you don't have lots of tools in your psychological toolbox to be able to deal with such difficult circumstances. So the shame and the frustration have left you feeling overwhelmed with this self-perceived failure that you've had. So what do? You try to deal with this difficult stuff to to turn it down or to eradicate it by drinking wine. So you open your bottle of wine, you're trying to soothe yourself with that substance. And perhaps even your partner, your well-meaning and supportive partner has tried to comfort and soothe you in that moment, but you have snapped at them, you have sulked and taken out your exceptionally bad day on them. So we can see here the bits, the drives that are dominant and the bits that need working on when we look at the diagram and apply it to this real life situation. We can also see how the three drives interact with each other and how they're meaningful to each other when we look at it like this. So something I'd encourage you to do is maybe try this yourself, because it can really help you to see those bits of yourself that you could work on, to be able to deal with those bumps in the road, as we call them, those difficulties that we all encounter in life a little more effectively. In our example, we can see that the drive and the threat systems are bigger. In fact, you could say that they're almost the same size here, couldn't you? And that isn't uncommon. Lots of people get stuck swinging between these two drives, and we can see that quite often the drive system can be triggered by the threat system. So in our example, we've got here our work and our income and our livelihood and what matters to our survival. In just the same way as being able to hunt and kill prey might have been to our ancestors. Without that prey, we could have starved to death. So our life could have been at risk. And we could say that the deep sense of wanting to escape a threat to our survival is powering our drive system here to succeed and get that promotion. This threat-based drive action or behavior is actually fairly common. But there is a problem here for us, in as much as swinging between these two positions and these two drives can be incredibly exhausting because it leaves no room at all for failure. Because failure, what does it do? It triggers threat. Unfortunately, we can't always avoid failure. We're all humans and we're fallible. So there's no space for it here, though, is there? No room. And by the same token, that means there is no room for peace or contentment. And all of this can be hugely problematic for our health and our well-being. Because of course, what happens when we're constantly swinging between these two positions? Well, we crash and we burn. And we experience that burnout from all of that flitting between these two states, these two drives. So why do we have such deep trouble recognizing all of this stuff? Well, that's because it involves very old, very base parts of our brain functioning that aren't part of our conscious awareness. Do you remember when we talked about neurology and our brain chemistry? Well, threat feels very bad for us on a very base and ancient level. It fills us up with that stress hormone and all that stress soup, all those chemicals whooshing around, the cortisol and the adrenaline, and it provokes a kind of ancient fear. So we seek to do something to make us feel better about that threat, and when we're doing something, we're turning to our drive system, and there we get a temporary dopamine hit, and that helps to alleviate that feeling of threat and that difficult feeling of fear, perhaps, or anxiety that we might have going on, might be experiencing. Now, politicians are a great example, because they know this about our threat system, and you might see them doing things like delivering messages of fear and threat and doom and gloom, blah blah blah, and then offering a solution. Perhaps you could vote for me. So we see that they're introducing a threat and a solution, and we also see this with advertisers. You might see advertisements for a health or beauty product, say a mouthwash that helps you with bleeding gums, and they might show you a message saying things like, well, you could lose your teeth if you have bleeding gums, but look, we're offering you the solution. You could go out and do something about this. You could buy our product. So we see this kind of threat-based drive motivation going on in these messages that can be viewed as manipulation. It's very interesting stuff. So being aware of that is a good step to being able to break out of this situation where we're swinging between these two drives. So now we've had a good look at the emotional regulation systems. Let's take a look at how that relates to our mental health again. So a lot of mental health problems and conditions can involve this overuse of the threat and drive systems. Just as an example, we do know that people who have more serious depression, they're going to be experiencing low mood, but also low motivation and negative feelings towards themselves quite often. And they tend to overuse their threat system in the form of kind of relying on this nagging inner voice, this inner critic, to motivate themselves to take action. So we've got that threat-based drive going on. But quite often what does happen is inadvertently is that this increases their distress. So we've got this nagging inner voice inside us. It's a bit like a grumpy teacher or a drill sergeant rather than a cheerleader. And all of that increases our stress hormones, that cortisol and adrenaline. And of course, when that happens, it is going to make failure more likely. And again, we know that failure is going to trigger off that threat drive. So now for this person, they're in the situation where they're thinking, my gosh, I don't like myself very much. And I failed at this. And now, you know what, I'm a failure too. So we've got this perfect storm of things coming together here. A kind of recipe for despondency and hopelessness and self-criticism, and that can lead to quite badly entrenched feelings of self-loathing. It can even be quite serious and lead to that kind of suicidal ideation we see in some mental health conditions. So people who have this idea that they're not good enough, which often comes with shame-based things, or that they're a failure, they really often do utilize the drive system in a quite unbalanced way to feel good about themselves. And that is understandable, but it can also lead to problems. For example, by kind of engaging and pursuing achievement so relentlessly in order to feel better about ourselves, to kind of do more, be more, and all of that stuff, people overutilize that drive system. And what happens then? Well, they experience higher stress levels as a result of that. And that's because this threat of failing to achieve, it can trigger a threat with feelings of disappointment and shame and the inner critic, which is kind of inadvertently triggering the threat system here. So we've got a loop, haven't we? It becomes a never-ending spiral, a kind of self-perpetuating suffering, all based on threat-based drive. So it's almost inevitable that this is going to result in unhappiness for us, because when you fail to achieve, well, it's inevitable that that's going to happen sometimes. It's never 100% guaranteed. Even the best of us, and we're only human, and we're fallible, and we do make mistakes. So, and a lot of things in life are beyond our control. So we'll be triggering off this threat because whenever we come at a drive from a threat perspective and fail, that failure does trigger off that loop that we were talking about, that self-criticism. And so we can see how in the case of mental health conditions that can be really problematic. So if that is the case for you, raising awareness of that is going to be really useful for you to be able to see that that is happening. So let's have a look and talk about our soothing system now. That's the system that's all about safety and caring and contentment and comfort. Now, like the threat, the drive system, we do arrive in this world hardwired with a soothing system. In evolutionary terms, it's related to our mammalian caregiving system. So we're this warm-blooded animal, aren't we? And often the soothing system, it operates quite naturally all by itself when there aren't any threats to defend against, and there's nothing for us to chase, there's nothing for us to pursue. And the system, it taps into all those feel-good brain chemicals that we got going on, the oxytocin, the cuddle chemical, our endorphins, the things that make us feel good, and as well opiates, which we talked about earlier. Now, unlike the threat and drive system, which get us all activated, they get us ready for action, our soothing system, it deactivates us, it calms us. It's all about our parasympathetic nervous system there. It kind of brings us down from this heightened state. And the soothing system is associated with this state of peace, feelings of calm, and it allows us to soothe ourselves and also others, and we can link it to those early experiences of receiving care, but also later experiences of giving care to others. And that affection, the kindness, the warmth, and encouragement, supportiveness. We know now from the research that these behaviours, they can have a mediating effect. They can weaken the more toxic effects of the threat system. And this way, the soothing system can bring us that sense of calm and safety and peace when we need it. We can tap into it. Sometimes people who've been overutilising their drive system, they can have a misconception around activating and tapping into their soothing system because they think that if they were more accepting of themselves, then they'd lose that motivation. It'd be akin to giving up on all of their ambitions and their pursuits, and they'd achieve very little. So they kind of think of it would demotivate them in some way. And this is massively incorrect. Whereas the threat-based drive is a weakness because it only works temporarily till you fail, because that failure, of course, inadvertently triggers the threat and the self-criticism. Approaching drive activities here from a place of soothing can provide you with a very, very, very strong sense of inner strength, an inner core of strength. And if you're able to support and nurture and soothe yourself, then you're more capable of being there for yourself, and you are there for yourself 24/7 every day of the year, day and night. You're there for yourself, aren't you? And that's really important because when you fail, when you trip up, when you hit those bumps in the road that inevitably come along with being human, then you're going to be there for you. You'll be able to handle that disappointment without spiraling off into that loop of self-criticism and shame and negative self-talk. So you can meet yourself wherever you are, and you can be there for you emotionally. And you learn from your mistakes. You support and nurture yourself, and you get back out there and you try again, if that's what you want to do. So by relating to yourself in this kind of way, you're not so motivated by your fear or your threat system. And in fact, you might even be more comfortable with yourself as a person, which means you can do a better job and it can just work better for you. So activating that soothing system that you've got makes you more resilient from the inside out, because we're not relying on our achievements to bolster our self-esteem here. We've got that core of inner acceptance, which is hugely powerful. So soothing is a source of strength, and it is not a vulnerability. It really is kind of your secret weapon. However, unfortunately for a lot of people, the soothing system can be hugely misunderstood and as well underutilized, or it might be completely blocked. And that might be true for those of us who've experienced early childhood trauma. Now, they have wounded forms of attachment, disorganized forms of early attachment, and the complex trauma. So, if that's part of our developmental history, or we've had a painful emotional or interpersonal experience, a kind of relational trauma that's induced that shame, a sense of rejection, and maybe we've been bullied, or we might have had parents who were not ideal, didn't really know how to care for us properly, or unresponsive. Maybe they didn't know how or weren't capable. So those behaviors and emotions that are associated with caring or safeness, in that case, can trigger a sense of threat instead. So that can be the case when that happens. So this is kind of part of trauma treatment. We learn to restore our soothing system to what it naturally is and should be, and that is something that is something that can give us enormous inner strength, and definitely worth learning. So it's worth exploring. So let's delve in a little bit to our Soothe system and look at how we can maybe incorporate that a little more into our daily lives, so that we can get in touch with that nurturing, caring, and self-compassionate part of ourselves. And what I'd invite you to do personally here as we go through this is to reflect on the things that have worked for you, that are working for you, but as well being honest and looking at the pros and cons of different ways of managing that ability to soothe ourselves. And yeah, look at what works and what doesn't. And if it doesn't work, if the things you've been trying haven't been working, then maybe have a think about trying something different rather than trying the same old thing over and over again to try and soothe yourself. So you can look at different areas, different types and ways of behaving here. And the first things we're going to look at are the biological and the physical things, and that can include things like exercise. It can be formal exercise, but it doesn't have to be all about going down the gym. It could be things like doing the garden or playing with kids even. We're talking about activity here. There are also those lifestyle things that we could incorporate, and what we're doing here is we're honouring our body, we're honouring ourselves and listening to what our body and mind needs, and we're giving ourselves that. We're saying that we deserve that. So that could also involve things like cutting down on unhealthy habits, maybe smoking cessation, and things like that. Things that are going to benefit us and nourish our bodies and our minds in that way. As well, we do have medications that we can use, especially if we're diagnosed with a mental health condition. Then there are a lot of medicines available for conditions like anxiety, depression, and it could be that maybe your GP, your doctor, has recommended a medication for you, but there are lots of different medications, and if one doesn't work for you, then perhaps another will. So, or you may decide that medication isn't for you, and you're perfectly within your rights to do that. It isn't for everyone. There are also alternative medicines and approaches, things like yoga, which I'm a big fan of, and acupuncture. Lots of things that help a lot of people. A lot of people find these alternative and holistic approaches really, really helpful. Also, there is getting out in nature, in the outdoors, in the natural world. And there's some interesting studies that show the benefits of that, especially in relation to things like anxiety and depression. Some suggesting that being in nature and walking in nature might be just as effective a treatment for these types of common mental health conditions as medication. So it was very interesting stuff. So we're going to have a look at the cognitive and mental approaches we can take to encourage that more soothing drive and to balance out our drives. And one way that we can do that is to engage with a talking therapy. Also very useful if we are struggling with a mental health condition again, or trauma, or a specific problem that we're trying to work through in our lives. And there are lots of different ones that we can choose from, things like CBT, of course, but also compassion-focused therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, mindful self-compassion, the kind of things that I practice, are also really, really good for that because they do encourage that sort of self-nurturing. We've also got psychoeducation, which is what you're doing right now. This is taking the time to educate and inform yourself about your psychological well-being or your well-being more generally. And a lot of people find that can empower them. They've got that knowledge and they're able to use that to find a higher level of awareness. Another really, really powerful tool is mindfulness, which a lot of people do relate to meditation. They're different things. With mindfulness, what we are doing is we're just finding a way to be in the present, and that is something that you can work into your daily life, just going about your business with practice. And it is a very, very powerful tool because it allows us to connect to the present. It can help us with things like rumination and dwelling, and it can help to stop us from leaning into that the threat and the drive systems too much, and help us to keep that balance. Other things that we've got here are things like creativity and journaling and expressing our emotions in a healthy and creative way. A lot of people find that very empowering and very helpful. Also, we've got any spiritual or philosophical beliefs that can help us along our way. These are related to our own personal values and our own personal way of looking at the world. They can be very personal. But as well, we haven't just got cognitive and mental approaches and the biological, we've also got the incredible power of social support. And this can be amazingly powerful. And of course, we're talking about friendship and family, but also our pets, our furry friends, our work colleagues as well. That can be a really valuable social network, especially when it comes to a shared sense of what's going on for us in our world at work. We're with our peers who will understand that a little more. So it can sometimes be worth our while getting involved in things at work. We also have social groups. This is whatever your hobbies or interests might be. And there's a little bit of crossover here that might branch off into creativity as well, or into physical activity if you're on a sports team, or maybe your interests are very specific. Maybe you're a gamer and you like to play games with other people online, things like that. Or it can also be that it's linked to our faith, and we might have a church community, mosque, something like that, where we meet with people who share our beliefs. That can also be a very strong source of support for you. Another really great thing that we can tap into is peer support, and lots of charities for specific conditions can help you to find peer support. And the essence of that is that you're in touch with people who have walked the same road as you, who maybe have the same condition or have been through similar experiences. And that can be very, very powerful again. It can really give you a sense of not being so isolated with whatever it is that you're going through. And online support as well can be really accessible, and it might be a good first place to start for somebody who's feeling a bit tentative about reaching out for support. It's a good place to begin, and lots of people did just that during the pandemic. So I'd really encourage you to think about all the different ways that you can find to balance these drives that you've got, and look for ways to find that more calm and more nurturing side of yourself. And that's going to be different for everyone. So this is about what is right for you and what works for you. So get out there and give it a try. Have a think about your drives and how you can incorporate that, your soothing drive, into your daily life, because that's going to really help you. Of course, if you're interested in self-compassion and compassion-based therapies, make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel, because there's lots of that stuff there, and it's something I'm really passionate about, and there'll be a lot more of there for you. So thank you for learning with me, and I hope you enjoyed this video all about our emotional regulation and our drives. Thank you for joining me.